Hi, hello, and welcome to LX2 Codependency Coaching. I am Stella. We are doing some things. I just spent the last 45 minutes trying to figure out cameras and scenes and blah, blah, blah. And what I find is that doing new things is hard, and that's okay. But I wanted to get started on today's podcast, even though my brain has dumped everything I was going to say. That's okay. We'll go on this journey together. So, I have been thinking about today's podcast, and let me offer some transparency here. Um, I've been doing this podcast since 2019, and I was doing it. I think you guys know, I started with a friend of mine, and we thought we were funny, and so we thought we'd start a podcast. And so in 2019, yeah, my friend Kat and I just decided to start recording ourselves having conversations. And there's lots of that content. But when I left in August of 2022 to go on my trip, I took over the podcast by myself and it took off. And I'm so grateful, right? I say grateful often because it's true. I am incredibly grateful that I have been able to capture an audience and say things and share things. And yeah, that's something to be proud of. And more recently, I have found that I sometimes struggle to figure out what I'm going to say. So there's that. But I do want to acknowledge that, there are times when I'm just burned out, where I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing, and now I have to learn a new program and learn a new situation. And even though I'm good at learning, it does get exhausting. So that is me just being vulnerable and transparent, though I'm not crying on the internet. So there's that. I did want to acknowledge that I did put a video, and now Podbean has connected the audio for the podcast onto my YouTube channel, which is a weird thing to say. But so the YouTube channel is LX2 Codependency Coaching Podcast, just like the name of the podcast. And so, yeah, the audio is available if that's how you consume it. The video will be available, and you can watch me say words to the internet. But yeah, the whole process is just like a little bit challenging. But like and subscribe, all the things. It's been a rough week in ways that I'm just like, okay, that was challenging, but it's also been a good week, and I got a lot done, and I saw some new clients and I saw some old clients, and we continue to do things. As the year wraps up and we are in September, it's nice that it's cooler outside, which is helpful. Um, and I'm trying to figure out like what I want the next year to look like. So I started the business in 2012 in August. And so that is my restart for the year, to kind of figure out like what I want for the year. And um, so as I was looking at just that, right? I'm starting to set goals for the next year. I'm starting to figure out like what I want to create and evolve and move forward. And I was thinking about that version of me. And one of the things that prompted the thinking about that version of me is, most of us have multiple emails, right? So I have my business email, lunax2.llc@gmail.com. And then I have my regular email, my grown-up email that has my name, right? And then I have like another email. Anyway, I have a bunch of emails, but one of the email addresses I have is alive.com, which is kind of an Outlook situation. I didn't realize how long I'd had it, but I've had it since 2012. And occasionally I go in and I clean up that inbox because it just has so many emails in it. And it's the junk mail email. So that's where I put, like, if I'm signing up for something or whatever, I usually put that email address. I was looking at it, and as I was cleaning it out, there were all these old emails from different versions of me. And as I was kind of, remembering or recalling or looking at some of these old emails, I was just like, wow, that's a part of my history. Uh, and I acknowledge now that with grace and compassion for the older versions of myself, I look back and think about where I was emotionally, physically, intellectually, all of the ways. I look back at, those versions and what she was doing and how she was doing stuff. Coffee. And what it had me thinking about was old coping skills. And certainly this version of me does not use so many of the coping skills that I used 13 years ago. But I was also thinking about how nobody really talks about missing some of those old coping skills and the feeling of the wrong kind of good, right? And I was thinking about that, right? The wrong kind of good. There's so many songs that are like, I don't know, something about the bad kind of good or whatever it is. But what it had me considering was when we use coping skills that we have either learned from our family of origin or we've learned over time that get the job done, but they're probably not the healthiest. And right, so that's when I talk about the bad kind of good or the wrong kind of good. It's like the unhelpful things that we have done to kind of get by, and then we just get used to doing those things. And so we're used to a set of coping skills, kind of the ones that were default, the default settings or the program, what is it called? Factory settings, right? When we look at those are the ones that just kind of came with this experience, and then we have to unlearn them and then learn new ones. And really thinking about the wrong kind of good is that idea of the coping skills that we used and have used for our whole lives, kind of at the beginning or at different points in our life that were not the most helpful, but they work. And so, an example, um, you know, uh, thinking about like parenting or just like being reactive, right? It's a coping skill and it is effective, but it's probably the wrong way to do it, even though that's the way we've always done it, right? And it's not until we learn a new skill that we realize, okay, that's the less helpful one. And so when we start to figure out new ones, it takes a lot of practice, and then we sometimes and often go back to that wrong one that, oh, I'm not supposed to do that or whatever. Working with couples is always fun for me because I teach them skills along the way, and then we process, right, how they are having conflict now that they know the new skill. And so I'm like, how often did you use it? They're like, well, I thought about it, and then I kind of went to my default setting. But when we recognize that something feels familiar, we assign that's it. Just feels better when I do that, right? So I don't know, I think I've shared with you guys before, but maybe not. I started smoking when I was 17 in Spain, and that sounds romantic or whatever. Um, it was born of um, my boyfriend at the time had smoked, right? He was a smoker at 17, which is just, anyway. But I was in Spain. I was there for a month, and, I missed the taste of his cigarettes when we would kiss. And so then somebody offered me a cigarette, and I was like, sure, whatever. I'd never done it before. But then I had the taste in my mouth, and so it was not helpful, but it was true. And so then I came back. Well, when I was in Spain, I was smoking these cigarettes called Fortunas. I don't know if they still make them. But my ex-boyfriend, or my boyfriend, he's dead now, but he used to smoke Camel Lights. So I thought I was so cool, and I would smoke cigarettes, and my mom would get mad. It was a whole thing. But that was the wrong way or the not most helpful thing to do. And I smoked cigarettes until 2018, and then I switched to vaping, and I still do that occasionally. But thinking about that, right? Okay, so what it came from was because I missed my boyfriend, and the taste of that kiss or whatever, and that's why I started smoking. And then I continued to smoke because I really enjoyed it. And actually, when I was in Europe, because you can still smoke there most places, I bought a pack of cigarettes, and I did not buy Fortunas. I don't think I looked, but I did start smoking cigarettes there occasionally. I didn't like the way it felt, right? I didn't like the way that it felt in my lungs. I didn't like the flavor in my mouth. I didn't like waking up just the feelings of smoking cigarettes, if you know what that is, then that's a thing. But I didn't like the way it felt. And I was like, I don't know why I picked this up again. I'm not going to keep doing it. And so I stopped. And when I came back to the States, I did buy a pack of cigarettes. It lingered for months, and then I was like, this is dumb. I'm not going to do it again. And so I didn't do it again. But that's the wrong kind of good, right? It's the not helpful thing that I picked up again, and it did not feel the same as when I had started using it. And so it's a way to think about the wrong kind of good, right? Anytime we are trying to learn new coping skills, new habits, new routines, it feels uncomfortable because we're so used to doing the same thing. But when we go back to doing it the old way, right, the way that we used to do it, or whatever it is, either it feels familiar and so you're like, oh, well, I know what this is, so I'll just keep doing it, or it feels uncomfortable and then you're like, why am I doing this old thing, right? So as I was thinking about the podcast this week, I thought about the way that I do everything or most things very methodically. I'm very oriented to, I get up, I do the thing, whatever. And so there's a whole lot of things that we do on a regular basis. Again, with intention, thinking about this is just how we do it. And it does help to move our day along. And so for those of us who have a job that is pretty consistently the same, even though I see different people every day, I do the same things with those people. I do my intakes the same. I usually start a session with like what's good with, clients that are familiar with me. I wrap it up. I pay attention to the time. Like there's a whole lot of small, consistent things that I do. And so when I do something new or something happens and it throws me off my routine, it can feel really uncomfortable. And so I intentionally, I think it was Tuesday, did things differently, not in the same order. Like I thought about it and I was like, okay, I'm going to do something different, right? And I allowed myself to move through the day very much intentionally doing things differently to see how I felt and to also see if it was maybe more efficient to do it in this non-traditional way, right? Not typical. And so a couple things happened. I was very conscientious of making the decision to do it differently and then also paying attention to how I felt when I was doing it. And it was interesting because like the day moved along the same. The timing was a little bit off and I was like, okay, there's a reason for this still. I would get frustrated or I'd get, just pay attention to like what was happening emotionally for me, but also just logistically throughout the day. And it was curious, right? So I did it with intention. I think I've shared with you guys before that, one semester or whatever, I wrote with my left hand to try to create a different feeling, to recognize how the information was integrated in my brain, to see whether or not my handwriting would improve. I broke these two fingers, the two middle fingers on my right hand a few years ago, and so I was incapacitated. I couldn't use it in the same way. And during that time, I had decided to use the audio feature or whatever to record my notes, kind of talking into Word, because I couldn't type, right? But those are things I was paying attention to. And so there have been several opportunities in my experience to do things in a different way. Now, back to this idea of coping skills, right? A lot of times when we are trying a new, workout routine, we're trying to eat better or differently, we're trying to react in a way that is less damaging to the relationship. All of those are intentional changes hoping for a better result, right? But also to re-regulate or to change how our brain works so that we can integrate that new skill, whatever it is, right? And lots of people go to new jobs or they have new routines. Maybe they're doing the same thing, but they're doing it with a different company. There's a lot of times that we have to adjust our normal to integrate new normal, right? And specifically to this wrong kind of good or this unhelpful dynamic that we have created, I was thinking about that, right? So I was thinking about working out, and because I've always been a workout human, I'm not a gym human. I don't like going to the gym, but I've always walked. I've always had gym equipment, so I do like weight training or strength training, resistance training. I have a TRX that I use on a regular basis. And so then I get away from using it, so then I have to reorient myself to doing it. And I think I told you guys, like I try to do at least 2 miles every day. So now I'm doing Monday through Thursday, and then on Fridays I do Pilates or yoga, just to move my body around in a different way. And strength training is super helpful. But integrating that as part of my routine has changed it up. It is always going to feel better to sleep in that extra hour, right? On Saturdays, I do sleep in, or I try to. But I do recognize that if I were to get in the habit of not doing my workout in the morning, it would affect so many different things. Yes, it would feel good to sleep in, but then I would also feel shame and guilt and all the other things for not following through to take care of my body, right? Wrong kind of good. Recognizing that yes, I would love to eat, bullshit all day long, but I do need to have salads. I make a really good salad, to be fair, but I do have to recognize, like, eating fiber is important for my digestion. It's also important for my body. And because I've been paying attention to, as my body ages, the things that work well for it, sometimes I have to add things. It would be great to eat cake and, Whoppers and green chili cheeseburgers every day, but would it, right? So that's the wrong kind of good. Like, in the moment, it feels like the right thing, but long term, it does not. There are so many consequences to the wrong kind of good. And that is true emotionally as well, right? One of the things that we learn and really pay attention to, especially if you're on this journey with me, is really increasing your awareness of the things that are your go-tos in terms of reactivity, or your go-tos in terms of where your brain goes on a regular basis. And we're so used to that, you know, consistent track or trail or thought record or doom train or whatever it is, that it's not helpful, but that's what we do, right? It's that wrong kind of good. It feels consistent and comfortable to do the same thing that we've always done. It is not helpful at in the moment to do something differently, and we feel uncomfortable doing those more healthy coping skills or more healthy choices. But in the moment, like, yeah, I'll just do the bullshit, whatever bullshit I'm used to, right? And so really thinking about that old version of me, 2012, 13, 15, 21, all the things. I was thinking about the coping skills I used to have and use at the time. And at the time, they felt good. They felt effective. They felt like that's what I needed to be doing. But really recognizing that they weren't maybe the most helpful for the growth that I wanted to create. And I want you to increase your awareness of, like, those coping skills that you use, right? I was thinking about it from a mental health and counseling or therapy perspective. And a lot of times when clients are new, they want to come in and they want to go on about their narrative of all the terrible things that have happened. And that's fine. I do recognize that's part of how the therapeutic process works. But what I'm trying to, at least, when people come to see me for therapy specifically, my goal is like, okay, that's the story, the way that you've always told it, right? This is who my parents are. This is their relationship dynamic. This is who I am. This is how I do relationships, whatever it is they're working on, right? And then I'm like, okay, how do we change it? Well, part of the way we change it is we integrate new skills. Part of the way we change it is to shift the perspective. Part of the way we change it is by recontextualizing the story so that it's not always the same, and we are not so focused cherry picking those feelings of, well, this terrible thing happened and this terrible thing happened. And all of that is true. We are not negating that process, but we're also increasing the awareness of, like, but there were also good things that happened. And I know that because you have things that you enjoy, you have memories that are positive. When we start to recontextualize the whole picture, it's not just the trauma and the terrible things. it is bigger than that, right? When we start to reorient your brain to be kinder and maybe more compassionate to you, I try to stop those moments where you're being negative or where you're being judgmental or where you're holding on to, well, this is just who I am, I'm a terrible person. I've yet to meet a terrible person in my office, to be fair. But that's how we feel, right, in our brain. So when we change it, that it's normal for us to gravitate towards that default setting of maybe those unhelpful, wrong behaviors and thoughts and feelings, but to shift it to find a different kind of good, right? A better kind of good, one kind of coping skill that is going to be more helpful to your goal. And if your goal is healing and growth and, changing how you orient yourself to the world, shifting your perspective, taking it from that forest to the trees, right? We're looking more at the forest and less at that one terrible tree that lives there. That's going to be a better kind of good. And figuring out how to recognize what your payoff is from holding on to those negative things or holding on to those unhelpful coping skills, holding on to those, unhelpful thoughts that you default to of like, I'm just unlovable or I'm just difficult or I'm just angry, whatever it is, right? There's a reason, there's a payoff, there is a good to holding on to those things and acknowledging that, like, if you can shift it, right? Some people's default setting is based in that perspective. Everything is bad, it will always be bad, and I only deserve bad things, right? Even though you have good experiences, you have positive things. And so that's part of why I ask what is good. And it's funny that my clients who've been with me for years, off and on for a long time, come in and say, oh, I forgot you asked that. And so now I have to reshift that orientation to finding something good because I know you're going to ask it, right? Again, I say therapy is not something you should have forever, but it is something that everyone should do at least once because it does shift the perspective. It changes the good. It changes your orientation if you work the process to find things that are more consistently, in a healthy way, good, right? So when we think about unhealthy coping skills or unhelpful behavior, eating shit, right, or not working out, or choosing relationships that validate that I'm just hard to love, whatever it is, I think about addictive behaviors, right? And they're addictive because they have a good. There is something positive that comes from it, even though it's the wrong kind of good, right? If my default setting is to, at the end of the day, have a drink every day, I know that I feel like shit after, right? So I don't do it very often. I know that it's not the most helpful. My behavior is not great when I drink or whatever. And so really kind of thinking about, okay, what is the good? And so I was, again, processing this idea of like, how do you feel before you do it? How do you feel while you're doing it? And how do you feel after you do it, right? So back to a healthy option. Back to working out, right? I feel better when I move my body around. I am validated by the fact that I had so many steps in a day or a week or a month. I look at the distance that I've walked and intentionally move my body around, right? I feel better before, during, and after. Maybe not before because I'm like, I have to give up, an hour of sleep. And I do recognize that it is a conscious choice. On the days that I choose not to, right? And I negotiate with myself every morning, right? Normally my body wakes up about 6:30. I do have a 7 a.m. alarm on my phone, but my body wakes up at 6:30. And I'm grateful when it's 6:30 because then I'm like, okay, cool. I've got half an hour to like orient myself to the day. Sometimes I'll like, well, I can take some time, whatever. I usually am out of the bed by 7:30, kind of getting ready, getting the dog ready, putting on my workout clothes, out the door by 8 a.m. And when I negotiate with myself to give myself a little bit of grace or to, I'm going to stay in bed a little bit longer because I don't start my day until 11 or whatever it is, I still end up falling into the default of I will feel better if I get up and get out the door, right? On Fridays when I do my yoga or Pilates or whatever, that routine is different. But now that I've integrated it, I've gotten used to it. I feel better when I can do some exercises that are different than my normal walk or run or whatever. And then I know that it's done. Like I feel better knowing that it's done. So I want you to think about those maybe wrong kind of good coping skills that you use or have used in the past, and what was the benefit? What was the payoff? What did you get from it, right? When we think about our relationships and our communication style, and really thinking about, I keep myself safe when I am defensive, when I am reactive, when I yeah but all the things. But is it helpful to the relationship, right? I hold back my I hold back from expressing my feelings or telling you what I'm going through, because if I tell you, if I'm vulnerable with you and you use it against me, or you throw it in my face, or you make it about you, I feel better. The payoff is I don't have to deal with it, right? I don't have to deal with your reaction to my situation, so I will just hold it in. The unfortunate part is if I am not communicating effectively, if I am not sharing how I'm feeling, if I'm not telling you when I'm frustrated or bugged, then I blow up later, right? I'm holding on to all these things, I get the opportunity, then we're fighting, right? Really thinking about, if I continue to choose unhelpful relationships and recognize red flags for what they are and then continue in them, the payoff is I'm still trying to figure these things out. Absolutely, 100%. And I also fall in love with potential. I'm choosing unhelpful partners, then my needs are not getting met, like all of the things, right? Just figuring out what it is, what is the payoff, and then also acknowledging, how do I feel before I do it? How do I feel while I'm doing it? And how do I feel after it's done? And that helps to increase the awareness of, how do I make a better choice for the me that I am trying to be. As I looked at those emails and as I recognized, the different things that I was going through, I could have been super judgmental about that version of me. What I chose this time was to look at that version of me, those emails, all the things, and I had compassion and grace and recognized, okay, Stella, there was a time when that kind of behavior and those kinds of choices validated that version of you. But look at how far we've come. The working hard every day to make those changes comes with acknowledging that wrong kind of good. Acknowledging that, yeah, I got a payoff. Absolutely. Yes, I validated those unhelpful thoughts in my brain by making those choices. I felt like, okay, this is who I am. This is just who I'm always going to be, right? But it's not, because now 52-year-old me in 2025 acknowledges that we don't do that anymore, right? We don't go out on Thursdays or Fridays and have too many drinks and then, feel like shit in the morning on a Friday. That's just not what we do anymore, right? If I choose to make those choices, I will have the consequences, whatever they are, of those choices. And now my brain says, is it worth it? Is it worth it to go back to an old version of me, to use the old coping skills? Today it's not, right? There might be a day when it is, and I'm not going to say that I will never do that again. There are some things I probably won't do again, but there are a lot more things that I choose consciously to have a better kind of good, a more helpful to this version of me kind of good. And without judging the past version of me, versions, I acknowledge that, like, having a cigarette in Italy was nice. Having a cigarette in Greece where I could just sit on a patio and have like a real cigarette. There was a good part of that. But I don't want to do that here. It doesn't fit for this version of Stella. So that's what I mean by the wrong kind of good. I do want you to pay attention, right? If you feel like the skills that you're using are not helpful to the version of you that you are growing and creating, think about how you feel while you're doing it. Think about how you feel after. And if changing it is challenging or difficult, maybe it's time to talk to someone and be like, hey, this is the thing I do. I don't like that I do it. How do I do it differently? Right? I'm always going to plug therapy because it's my job. Though I am not the only therapist that's good, there's lots of good ones out there. All right, there's your nugget. I'm going to work on figuring out how to post all of this stuff. learning new skills. I love learning, but it is challenging. But I'm grateful to be able to take the time to do it. I hope that you get something positive out of this. If you want to give me feedback, it's lx2.cod.coach@gmail.com. You can reach me on all of the platforms. You know how to get a hold of me. If you want to schedule an appointment, you can do that on my website. You can reach out. There's so many things. If you are appreciating this, and I hate asking, but I will continue to promote it because it's growing. It does the thing. You can like it and share it. And now you can subscribe to my YouTube at LX2 COD Coaching Podcast. So I will talk to you soon. I'm going to post video and I'll post the audio, and I will share all of that with you. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Okay.